So then at 18 months, somebody will come in and say, this child has autism, right? Someone comes in, pediatrician, somebody says, this, usually not the pediatrician, usually it's the parents who are upset. Usually the parents have to go to the pediatrician and say, oh my God, there's a problem here. Usually the pediatrician says, come on, you all know what the pediatrician says? Yeah, it's a boy. It's a boy, boys develop later. Or, you know, look, there's a bell curve of normal, typical development, and even if he's out at the edge, he's still developing fine, right? And usually the mommies or the daddies really know that there's a problem. So anyway, so at 18 months, somebody says this kid has autism. So immediately what happens, Tina can tell you this, what happens is the parents become instant experts, they go on the internet, they work their butts off in an attempt to find out what is wrong with their child, they try to find out what they could best do. What happens is they usually get told that applied behavior analysis is the way to go, almost universally. I can tell you that from my private practice. I can tell you that from every person who comes in here to the Rebecca School. That what families get told very early on is that applied behavior analysis is the way to go. Now, thankfully, early intervention here in New York seems to have decided that developmental models are useful. But parents very often get told, get as much applied behavior analysis as you can, and that's the way to go. And parents tend to think, well, okay, it's free, or it looks free to them, and it's actually paid for by governmental agencies, which means that it's also paid for by your tax dollars, which means that you're supporting it. But that magic, by the way, the behavior analyst will come right to your house and work with your kids for lots of hours. And what will happen is the applied behavior analyst will come to your house and say, hands down, and the child will put his hands down, and the parents will be relieved. And they're relieved because they say to themselves, oh, my child is still alive. My beloved child can actually do something on request. So at that 18-month period when an applied behavior analyst goes in the house and magically makes this child who's been so unresponsive be able to keep his hands down, can you blame a parent on the face of the earth who doesn't think that's just a magical, wonderful intervention? And they get it, and the people come to their houses, and this child they thought was lost, they suddenly see is there. They're astounded, and they're amazed, and they pursue applied behavior analysis. And before too long, now, it begins to feel a little uncomfortable. Like they begin to feel a little uncomfortable. They get sad. And I'm talking about the parents. They get a little bit sad. And the people who come to the house make their child do things, but the child begins to cry more. Begins to cry. Doesn't really like it. Cries when people come to the door. If you read Respecting Autism, you know one family describes the people as the vampires who came to the house. Not that the applied behavior analysts were in any way vampirish or anything, but it just felt like so draconian to them. It felt horrible to them after a while. And then the parents finally say, I don't want you to do this anymore. And then what does the behavior analysts always say? They always say, well, give us some more chances. Just give us a little more time. Just give us a little more time, and we'll control the contingencies a little more tightly, and then it'll be okay. So the applied behavior analyst begins to work harder, begins to reinforce shorter and shorter schedules. They punish more quickly, ignore more vigorously, and in some percentage of the cases, the kids say, well, you know what? I'm imagining what the kids say, by the way, the kid is not saying. Well, you know what? The world is too frightening and overwhelming to me. I can't make it all make sense. It seems so random anyway. I must be missing some important piece, and so I will trust these people around me to tell me what to do. And then the child falls into some abject lethargy, and he sits and waits to be told what to do, accepts the ideas of others, and the parents, although they think their child is now too robotic, become convinced that this is all the child will ever be able to do. They're sad, but they become resigned. So I cannot tell you how many times, this is all taken from discussions with parents. This is not entirely out of my free rambling line. But parents, very often when they enter the door here, will say, I love my child, he's made great progress, I just cannot stand that he's so robotic. That they very often say that. So they decide to bring the kid to the Rebecca school. And they don't like that he's become too robotic. There's one possibility, that's about, I would say, 5% of the kids. And the other 95% of the kids are that they've been thrown out of another school. Well, you know, the thing is this. They get thrown out of the other school, but the parents were also feeling all along, I don't like what's happening, but I think it's the only thing I can get, and so I'm going to stay with it. Even though I know I don't like it, even though the kids are looking robotic to me, even though I hate that he doesn't like to go to school, even though I don't like the fact that I can't get him on the bus in the morning, that he can't do any projects, please basically don't let me go back there. But I was sending him there because they seemed to know what they were doing, and I don't have another option. Then he gets thrown out of the school, and then they say, I didn't like the fact that he was so robotic, I didn't like the other stuff. And they come to the Rebecca school because they imagine that, or they've heard that Rebecca is something, and I say that advisedly because they don't really know what it is that we are. They hear it's something special or important or different or something that they don't quite understand, but better in some magical way. So they come here for an interview, and loving and caring, Rebecca School accepts him with open arms, as we always do, and I'm sure you know we always do. And he's suddenly thrust into a situation where he cannot understand one thing that's going on. Because nobody seems to be saying, okay, hands down, walk this way, go here, time for circle, shake the bell, here's your lunch, eat with a spoon. Right? And so the kid has no idea what he's supposed to be doing. So what happens? He gets overwhelmed. And he can't figure out what thing on earth could possibly be happening. It isn't even that he says to himself, I'm confused, because he doesn't even know what confused is. He has no idea even what to be confused is. He doesn't have anything in his head which he can recognize as the thought on which he can act. He doesn't have anything coming in through his senses which trigger desire, which he then feels so that he can then form a thought. And he doesn't even recognize thought, that is, on which he can act. Get the secrets. Doesn't trust what's coming into his senses because it never made any sense. He doesn't know that he has desires that he can act on, and then he doesn't know that a thought exists because nobody ever said, hey, a thought is actually useful to you. Or a thought exists, you could have one if you wanted to. What people said to him was, go over here, stand up, sit down. I mean, you guys have done applied behavior analysis. You know one of the ways to get the kid to come back when they're in a little place. Okay, stand up. Put your hands on your head. Sit down. Get them to imitate you. Sit down. Okay, now you're back in it. And so what happens is he becomes increasingly anxious and increasingly disoriented. So you get a kid who comes into the Rebecca school who can't recognize that he even has the right to have a thought or that he has a thought, although certain things are happening. And so he begins to get really anxious.